Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I'm very pleased to be joined by Sir Albert Ball, leader of Birmingham City Council and a long-standing member and Labour councillor for many years, a supporter of the Labour Party. Sir Albert Ball, thank you for joining the Sikh channel. Are you involved in the general election? You're not standing for Parliament, but are you involved very much in the campaigning?
Well, the campaigning is going on for both the general election and, of course, the local elections, because here in Birmingham we have a local election on the same day. So there are campaigns.
Has that been overshadowed by the general election?
Oh, very much so, yes. And that's traditionally the case, that when there is a general election on the same day as a local election, those in the spotlight tend to be the members of Parliament or those seeking to be members of Parliament.
Yes.
So the local councillors, whilst they're still part of an election campaign, are very much running secondary to the general election.
And what's your view of the current campaign? Because it's quite a strange time in British politics. We've seen a splintering of the parties. The Scottish National Party have thrown a lot of uncertainty into the current environment. And are we into an era of coalition governments for the foreseeable decades to come?
Well, let me use your word, strange. It is a strange time in a sense. We're very much used to two-party politics here in Britain, and moving from one political party to another at an election time. But it's a very difficult election to predict this because of a number of uncertainties. We don't know quite what's going to happen up in Scotland. We don't know what's going to happen here in England in terms of the presence of UKIP. But I guess, and it's I suppose no better a guess than anybody else's, yes, that we're going to end up with a hung parliament.
And UKIP are getting some support in many different parts of the country. And why is that? Is it a protest vote? Are people just fed up with immigration and the political elite? Is it a protest vote, or is it a bit more underlying than that?
Well, certainly that's how some people would describe it, a protest vote, a protest against a number of issues, immigration being one of them, membership of Europe being another.
Are they valid points? What's your view on immigration?
No, I don't believe they are valid points, and I think the more these issues are debated, the more that the UKIP perspective on these is shown to be quite a false one. On immigration, this country has thrived in recent years because of an influx of people from different parts of the world, and indeed from Europe. And that freedom of movement amongst the European member countries is something that cannot be changed, will not be changed, and should not be changed in my view. People will come into the UK because there is a buoyant economy and will seek jobs here and help the economy move forward.
Yes.
So I think there is a false set of arguments here, which unfortunately some people have alighted on.
The public don't feel that they're false. There is some support for this immigration issue.
Well, of course there is, because people feel concerned, but actually the greatest concern often is in those areas of the country where there is least immigration, which is a strange consideration here. In Birmingham, it's not so much an issue. I haven't heard it on the doorstep particularly. I don't think it will figure in many of the elections across Birmingham, because immigration doesn't tend to have the same prominence, if you like,
yes,
as it does in other parts of the country.
And the Labour Party, traditionally the ethnic communities have been very strong voters and supporters of the Labour Party. Have you taken that vote for granted over the decades? And now with the more integration of the Asian communities into British society, will you be losing more votes to the Conservatives and Liberals?
Well, if you look at the statistics, the voting statistics over the last 10, 20 years, you'll find that, in fact, across all the ethnic groups, the Labour Party has been losing some of that support that it had previously from immigrant groups.
The 60s and 70s.
The 60s and 70s was extremely high. People did vote Labour, and that was about all they thought of voting.
Yes.
There is much more consideration given to these matters across all communities these days, and the Labour Party doesn't have quite the majority amongst most of the ethnic minority communities that it previously had.
Why is that? Is that because of their policy, or is it because they've taken it for granted, or are they a bit aloof?
Well, it's not just about ethnic minorities, though. It's about communities as a whole. people, I think, are thinking a bit more about the politics than they used to.
They're better informed.
Well, you were brought up perhaps in a household, your mum and dad voted a particular way, and so you voted a particular way. You voted possibly because of word of mouth, and the word of mouth was within the home.
Yes.
These days you've got television, you've got radio, you've got social media, and so there are people now thinking about things in a very, very different way than they perhaps did even 20 years ago.
And Ed Milliband, do you like Ed Milliband, or are you like Tony Blair, not so keen on him?
Well, it's not for me to get into the politics in personal terms here. Ed Milliband, now the Labour Party leader, is doing very well, I think, at the moment. Has confounded a number of people in the very recent television interviews. Come up far better than many people thought he would. Shown himself to be a possible Prime Minister. I have no doubt about that. But any comparison between Ed Milliband and Tony Blair would be about comparing, I suppose, Cameron and Major or Cameron and Churchill. Let's not look back on the past. I think we're looking to the future and the way in which Labour would take forward this country.
And who would you like to see Labour partner with if there is a coalition government and Labour have a sizable number of seats?
Well,
who would you like to see Labour partner with?
It's not about not about wanting a partnership necessarily.
It may be a reality.
But let's wait for May the 8th and the votes having been counted, and then we can look at it.
The Scottish Nationals, maybe.
Well, it may well be the SNP, it may be, I don't know who else. But look, I've got a good experience of politics where there are partnerships, where there are coalitions. I do quite a bit of work in Europe and across in mainland Europe, both at a local level and indeed at a national level. Coalitions are part of the political scene. So I do have that experience of working with, talking to politicians elsewhere in Europe, where they will look after the election at that issue. It's not about jumping into coalition with someone within 24 hours. It's about looking to see what the policies are that can best be taken forward through some sort of coalition majority.
And Birmingham as a city, is Birmingham in danger of being eclipsed by Manchester, by Greater Manchester? And what's your plan to make sure that Birmingham stays a second city?
Well, actually, I never see or consider Birmingham as being the second city. Birmingham's the first city outside of London, is the way I'd like to describe it. And Birmingham's economy is moving forward. Let's appreciate that in terms of growth in the economy. GVA rose by some 6% last year. That's twice the rise in GVA that was nationally, about 3% nationally, 6% in Birmingham. And indeed in Manchester it was, I think, no higher than 4. So we're doing, in that sense, much better than other parts of the country. The economy is moving forward and jobs are being created.
And there's a sizable Sikh population in Birmingham, but they're not represented in the council very well. Why is that?
We've got a couple of members who are from the Sikh community. They're on the Labour side. There's no one there from the Conservative side or the Lib Dem side.
Why are there not so many?
Well, it's not about... I think if we have, in terms of ethnic minority representation, something of the same balance as the community in Birmingham as a whole.
Does that reflect the community?
In overall terms, yes. But if you then start dividing up the ethnic minorities, ethnic minority by ethnic minority, of course you don't have that balance. There is no, for example, there is no Chinese representation in the City Council, or Polish representation in the City Council. There is Sikh representation. There are 2 members, both on the Labour side, and they may well or may not
and what would you say to the Sikh community here in Birmingham? How should they get more involved in local politics?
Well, I think that's the starting point for all of this. You don't become a councillor because somehow you're spirited out of the ether onto the benches on the City Council. You first of all have to get elected, but before you're elected you have to become selected as a candidate. Now, how are you going to become selected as a candidate? Well, if you're trying to become a representative of a political party, you've got to be involved in that political party. And so my message, if you like, out to the Sikh community, if they're wanting greater representation, both at parliamentary level and at local level, then is to get involved, to get stuck in alongside other communities, other individuals, in helping to run campaigns of one sort or another in their community, And I don't mean by that within the Sikh community. I think the politics of this transcends communities. And we simply have to be active. We have to be active where we live. We have to be engaged with the communities within which we live. And I just encourage...
to get involved.
I encourage the Sikh community here in Birmingham to become more involved.
And we've had a lot in the news about grooming. It's been a huge issue across the country. How does that feature in this election? And how does that feature in Birmingham City Council? Because Birmingham has not hit the headlines with grooming, but no doubt it does exist. And has it been swept under the carpet?
No, look, we have an issue in Birmingham. We acknowledged it a couple of years ago that safeguarding of children in this city was not what it should have been over a number of years. And that's the reason why government put in a commissioner, Lord Norman Warner, to try and help the City Council become rather better in the way that it looked after children here in this city. Birmingham actually did something which we are quite proud of as a City Council. Just a few months ago, we took civil action against a small number of people who we thought were involved in sexual exploitation of children.
Was that successful?
It was a civil action. It was the first ever done in the country. One of our lawyers within the council found a bit of old legislation which had never been repealed and effectively used it in the High Court to ensure that certain individuals were named and shamed, if you like, and were prohibited.
Will there be more actions to follow?
Well, we're told that sometimes the police find it very difficult for lack of evidence to take cases forward in the courts.
So what can the community do?
I think expose those issues. If there is any understanding of things happening which should not be happening, I think that needs to be reported. It needs to be reported through to social workers, it needs to be reported to the police. Those who are in authority need to know about these things and they need then to explore them. I think unfortunately in past years, whilst there's been an awareness of child sexual exploitation, grooming if you like, the community hasn't acted on that. The police haven't properly acted on it. Local authorities haven't properly acted on it. And that's why, of course, we've got the big fuss about places like Rotherham at the moment.
Yes. And Sikh schools, the Sikh community have welcomed the free schools under the Conservative government. Labour aren't so keen on free schools. What would you say from Birmingham City Council to the Sikh community who want to see a greater number of Sikh ethos schools, particularly with the Sikh value system, which has been espoused by David Cameron as epitomising the British values, and they do align quite well. Do you think Sikh values need to be projected across Birmingham City?
Well, as a political party, we haven't opposed free schools. What we have said, though, is that free schools should only come about when there is a shortage of places. We feel that by putting down a free school in an area where there are no shortage of school places disrupts the education in that area. It disrupts schools who are perhaps good or excellent in terms of their achievement.
The Sikh ethos in those free schools, is that of benefit to the wider community?
It can be, just as there are schools that come from a different denomination, if you like, and we have not either opposed or encouraged schools to come forward, either representing a Sikh ethos or a Muslim ethos, or indeed an evangelical Christian ethos. But where those schools have been advocated and where the community has come forward, we've given whatever assistance we can. And of course there are several Sikh ethos schools already here in Birmingham.
Yes. And what's your message to the Birmingham Sikh community, finally, for the general election in 60 seconds? In
60 seconds. Think about it, think what's best for Birmingham, think what's best for your own community, your own family, and vote accordingly.
Thank you, Sir Albert, for joining the Sikh channel. Thank you very much. ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ